This is a podcast from the Daily Grind, India's first audio newspaper. Hello and welcome to the Daily Grind, everybody. I'm Ankit Prasad. We've been working on something new, and that something new is a Facebook Live companion show called Filibuster, which you'll be able to catch later tonight and every night, and then again immediately after the release of every episode. That debuts tonight on our Facebook page and also on YouTube. Today though, on Wednesday the 30th of November, we are not asking the really big questions in current affairs, but we are talking about business and also about one very tragic sports-related incident. We'll begin with business and the government though. Now, we've said before that this government likes to believe that it knows how to do business, and while we're yet to see actual proof, the processes sound believable enough, and the targets are most definitely ambitious, which they will have to be given the sheer numbers in India. In terms of jobs, the government clearly sees the IT sector as a big competitive advantage of the country's, and before the IT biggies squander that by failing to move up the value chain, Messrs. Modi and co want to take things into their own hands. For that purpose, a new draft of the first ever national software policy has been unveiled, and it aims to turn India's software industry into a $148 billion heavyweight that employs 3.5 million people in all by 2025. This is separate from the IT industry, which is about that big now, but plans to become a $350 billion industry, employing 30 million people in all by the same date, that is 2025. The 11-page report, which is on the Ministry of Electronics and Information Technology or MeitY's website, also acknowledges that this industry is heavily dependent on the quality and employability of talent. It doesn't go into detail about how it will overcome the challenges, but we're guessing you can help with ideas as it's open for consultation. We'll post the link to our page. Also, in terms of inviting suggestions, the Finance Ministry has begun working on next year's budget, which is reportedly going to be presented on the 1st of February. And it's invited people to write in their suggestions and such, which it says is a regular feature. So if you want to tell them to forget about farmers this time around and instead focus on a hostile takeover of Sri Lanka, here is your chance. Some FDI in Gujarat news now. The Chinese SANY Group, which sounds like it started out ripping off Sony of Japan but is now one of the largest heavy machinery and equipment companies in the world, has signed an MOU with the Gujarat government to invest $2 billion over the next 5 years to set up various infrastructure and energy projects, as per Money Control. Here's what the report says. As per the MOU, SANY Group will invest in 5 different projects, including development of a 1000 megawatt wind energy project, another 1000 megawatt of wind plus solar power generation project, setting up facility to manufacture wind turbines, developing one small-size smart city, and setting up a factory to produce precast concrete for the mass housing projects and other real estate projects. So that's great. And then, Japanese car maker Suzuki is going to invest 2,600 crore rupees to set up an assembly plant plus an engine and transmission unit in Gujarat in Mehsana. The units are expected to be operational by 2019 and will lighten the load on the existing Maruti factories as they will manufacture cars for Maruti Suzuki Limited as well as for the export market. We'll head into some really intriguing industries now. In the telecom space, Reliance Jio has apparently crossed a pretty incredible milestone. Just about 3 months since its launch, Jio has reportedly breached the 50 million subscriber mark, which means that it's reached the halfway point in Mukesh Ambani's first target of 100 million subscribers, which was to be achieved as soon as possible. The likes of Airtel, Vodafone and Idea have somewhere in the region of 200 million subscribers each though, so Jio is still not in that zone yet, and there's always the fact that nobody's paying for the data services or the content yet. They'll only be chargeable a month from now. So how many more will Jio be able to hit by then, and how many will stick? However, one important factor to consider here is that since Jio is a 4G only service, a good number of the subscribers have purchased new 4G handsets specifically to use with Jio, and as a result, the Life brand of smartphones is suddenly one of the best sellers in the industry. That may help with the stickiness. And also, Jio is yet to push MNP. Meanwhile, the incumbents, meaning Airtel, Vodafone and Idea, have been using one too many tricks to halt the new entrants' progress apparently, and this has reportedly led to Jio complaining to the competition watchdog, the Competition Commission of India or CCI, about cartelization in the industry. Nobody wants to cede an inch, clearly. Meanwhile, over in the e-commerce space, Flipkart is facing a valuation meltdown. A mutual fund investor in Flipkart, managed by Morgan Stanley, has marked down the value of its holdings in the Bangalore-based company for the 4th time in the last year or so. And so, from being valued at $15 billion when it raised its last round of funding in June 2015, Flipkart is now valued at just $5.54 billion. But wait a minute, doesn't this mean that a lot of people have watched their investment shrink? Like Morgan Stanley, for instance. Well, it turns out, as per Mint, that Morgan Stanley's fund only owns a stake worth about $100,000 as per the current valuation. That's approximately a 50,000th of the value of the company. And so what this means is that Flipkart is getting a lot of bad press because of one pretty measly investor. All will actually become clear once Flipkart raises money again, and such a time can't be far. Facebook has had some great news on the other hand. The social media giant has reported a 43% jump in revenues in India for the year ended March 2016. So it is dated news, but as per the Economic Times, it gives us a good understanding of how Facebook monetizes users and what the internet scene in India is like. The report says that Facebook's revenue from India was 177 crore rupees, which equals 16 rupees per Facebook user. However, in the same period, Facebook made 610 rupees per user in the US. So every US user is something like 40 times more valuable than an Indian user. Indian users can increase their worth to Facebook by simply scrolling through the feed more, hence being shown more posts and ads. So that's one effect of more and inexpensive data. And on that note, Facebook has begun testing its latest attempt at bringing internet to the Indian masses. It's setting up express Wi-Fi hotspots in rural areas to allow people from there to use the net. A sizable chunk of the next billion internet users are expected to come from India. In top-level staffing news, big league management consulting firm McKinsey has named a Gautam Kumra as its new MD for India starting next year. He was elected to the post as per VC Circle, though the company's global MD Dominic Barton took the final call. Gautam Kumra's LinkedIn says that he founded the McKinsey Leadership Institute and leads McKinsey's organizational practice in Asia. He actually seems to have been at the same company his whole working life since he graduated from IIM Ahmedabad in 1993. He is also an IIT Delhi alumnus like Raghuram Rajan and Chetan Bhagat. Meanwhile, also at the very top of the corporate ladder, Tata Power has picked December the 26th as the date on which it will hold the EGM that will seek to remove Cyrus Mistry as chairman. Mistry actually chaired the board meeting yesterday, though there was no power struggle there, such as what happened at TCS and Tata Global Beverages. Tata Sons, the promoter, wants him out though, and what he wants is a bit of decency. We don't see why they can't both get what they want. And also in news regarding the Tatas, we can expect word from Tata Steel and its operations in the UK in a couple of days' time. There's likely to be a JV with ThyssenKrupp for the Port Talbot plant and a sale of the remaining assets to a Liberty House. We'll have those stories for you as and when. Coming back to HR related news and trouble, European plane maker, the Airbus group, has said that it will be shedding up to 1,200 jobs as part of a cost-cutting attempt, which will see its corporate headquarters merging with its commercial jetliner unit. That aspect has to be seen as a strategic narrowing of focus, and also, as is the case with most layoffs these days, by the sound of things, nobody's actually getting fired in the conventional sense. But there are voluntary exits, attrition, and such techniques. Both Airbus and Boeing have way more orders than they can fulfill at the moment, and the world is crying out for a third alternative. Meanwhile, one of these giant aerospace companies' customers, the German airline Lufthansa, is still having trouble with its pilots. They've gone on strike again, and something like 800 of 3,000 flights were cancelled yesterday as a result. This is the 15th such strike since 2014 as per Reuters. It's a money issue, and the pilots' union seems quite strong and adamant. A couple of German car makers are facing some trouble in South Korea meanwhile. BMW, Porsche, as well as Nissan of Japan are being accused of manipulating documents to make their cars roadworthy as per the Wall Street Journal. The South Korean government may want to ban some models. Also in South Korea, Samsung is under some pressure from an activist shareholder. Elliott Management of the US has long wanted Samsung Electronics to split into a holding company and an operational company, and then for the holding company to combine with Samsung C&T, which currently is the holding company of most of the Samsung group, which has a very complex structure. Also, Elliott Management wants Samsung to pay shareholders a pretty large dividend from its massive cash reserves. The same shareholder also has similar plans for IT consulting firm Cognizant as per reports. Basically, it wants these companies to return more wealth to shareholders. Samsung is said to be seriously considering the idea, and the other shareholders are bound to be loving it. Over in energy news, China has said that it will spend at least $176 billion on hydro and wind energy by 2020. That's tame by China standards. Meanwhile, in solar energy, India has unveiled the world's largest solar power plant. The Kamuti Solar Power Project in Tamil Nadu, which has a capacity of 648 megawatts, consists of 2.5 million panels and is spread over an area of 10 square kilometers. It's been commissioned by its owner, the Adani Group. It takes the record of world's biggest solar plant from the 550 megawatt Topaz solar farm in California. Whatever you say though, 10 square kilometers is a lot of space for 600 odd megawatt capacity. It did just take 8 months to build and cost 679 million though, so those are definitely advantages. We'll come to ownership and funding news now. Starting in India, Math Buddy, which is a Baroda-based startup in the math education space, which was founded all the way back in 2007, has raised its seed round of funding, thereby giving hope to any entrepreneur who's been having trouble getting off the ground. The description reads, Math Buddy is focused on helping children learn and practice math concepts through math activities, math worksheets, math quiz, and fun math games. In the dairy business, a Ranchi-based dairy products company called Echar Food Processing, which makes and markets its stuff under the Osam brand, that's OSAM, which we think is how they say awesome, has raised 45 crore rupees in funding. It'll use the funds to expand production and distribution in Jharkhand and in Bihar as per business standard. Speaking of places from where we don't generally get news of this sort, Pakistan's flag carrier, Pakistan International Airlines, which has a $3 billion debt burden as per the Economic Times, has raised $130 million in financing from a banking consortium. The new money will be used to pay off the old loans, or at least some of them. PIA is not yet profitable as per the report, which means that Air India wins that particular competition. It adds, Prime Minister Nawaz Sharif's government tried to privatize the airline earlier this year, but its 18,000 employees fiercely resisted. In steel, JSW Steel, which is held by Sajjan Jindal and is headquartered in Mumbai, wants to acquire a loss-making Italian steel plant called Ilva and has joined with a set of investors for this purpose. It's competing with a rival consortium that includes ArcelorMittal. We'll keep you abreast of any developments. And back in the country, giant PSU SAIL, or the Steel Authority of India Limited, has received the government's approval to sell stakes in 3 units at Bhadravati, Salem and Durgapur. A couple of IT giants are buying similar stuff. Accenture has bought a London-based creative agency called Karma Rama and has spoken about integrating the target company's DNA. Accenture has its own digital unit called Accenture Interactive. And Cognizant has acquired a digital media and customer engagement agency called Mirabeau. It's based in the Netherlands. Cognizant too has a digital arm called Cognizant Digital Business. What's up, Infosys? Meanwhile, a company more closely in the media space, Group M, has more techie aspirations. Group M is forming a new data and tech unit called M Platform. One thing it wants to do is build something called MID, which will be like a universal login or authentication plugin which other services can use, like how they use Facebook and Google for logins these days. Over in the video game space, Tilting Point, which is a mobile game publisher based in New York, has launched something called the Game Alliance, which is a fund for user acquisition for independent developers, that is, developers who want to self-publish, maintain ownership of their intellectual property, and retain all of their equity. The fund's resources will apply to globally released games showing traction in the marketplace. So if you're an indie game maker, Game Alliance from Tilting Point is where you should head. In online payments, a US-based fintech company called Stripe has raised $150 million and has doubled its valuation from about $5 billion to near about $9 billion. Stripe has been amping up its product lineup to a variety of payment services. Also in New York City, Time Incorporated, which is the publisher of Time Magazine, Sports Illustrated, Fortune, People, and many others, including our favorite, Entertainment Weekly, has rebuffed a takeover offer that values it at just about $1.8 billion. The offer was from a guy called Edgar Bronfman Jr., but what's more interesting to know is that Time's valuation is about the same as that of BuzzFeed, and it's not like either of them are doing great shakes in terms of hitting revenue targets. And this was in an election year, that too. So whether it's digital or paper, or Audible for that matter, it's tough. To products and consumer news now. For flyers, Jet Airways has got a discounted ticket sale ongoing till the 2nd of December, so you may want to head there and see if there's anything good. And for two-wheeler enthusiasts, Italian bike maker Ducati is celebrating its 90th anniversary, and to celebrate, it slashed the price of its Scrambler range by 90,000 rupees till the end of this year. There are 4 variants, and they start at 6 lakh rupees post-discount. In crazy country news, China reportedly wants to turn itself into a social media dystopia. Our bonkers neighbor is said to be working with the big internet companies there to assign people a social credit score, which realistically they could use for any purpose. There was a recent episode of the TV series Black Mirror called Nosedive, which demonstrates what a painful existence that could be. Over in San Francisco, a 58-floored building called the Millennium Tower that was sinking is now also teetering. It sunk about 16 inches and is teetering by 2 inches, so it's not quite like the Leaning Tower of Pisa just yet, but there are cracks around the building on the sidewalks and the people who live there aren't happy at all. The builder, who has been sued obviously, denies there's any cause to worry, but there is now evidence all the way from a satellite in space that has observed that the building is sinking quicker than previously thought. A couple of weeks back, Oxford English Dictionary announced its word of the year. Post-truth told us what a glum year it's been, or at least the latter half. But now dictionary.com has abandoned all pretense and has gone one better. It's chosen xenophobia as its word of the year. That means the fear or hatred of foreigners, people from different cultures, or strangers. Its explanation was, this year, some of the most prominent news stories have centered around fear of the other. Fear is an adaptive part of human evolutionary history and often influences behaviors and perceptions on a subconscious level. However, this particular year saw fear rise to the surface of cultural discourse. Because our users' interest in this overarching theme emerges so starkly for one specific word in our trending lookup data, xenophobia is Dictionary.com's 2016 word of the year. Last year, the word of the year was identity. Clearly, Dictionary.com doesn't beat around the bush. We'll close this section with environmental news. That Great Barrier Reef's mass bleaching event from earlier has finally produced a score. The bad news first. It's terrible. In the north part of the reef, which used to be a very pristine and beautiful area, 67% of the coral is dead. It's better in the central and south areas, so there is still something to cling on to, but a dead reef is as stark and desolate as a living reef is vibrant and mesmerizing. And it's Australia's job to find a way to keep water temperatures in a 1400-mile stretch within limits. Surely there has to be a way that doesn't cause a disaster somewhere else. It's time for what used to be our sports and entertainment section now, but it's a little muted today. There's only one story and one place to begin, sadly. Late tonight, or rather in the early hours of tomorrow morning, we would have witnessed the first leg of the final of the Copa Sudamericana, which is the second club cup competition of the South American Football Federation, CONMEBOL. It's sort of the Europa League to the Copa Libertadores, which is the Champions League of that football-mad continent. The first leg was to be played in Medellin in Colombia between hosts Atlético Nacional and a little-known Brazilian club called Chapecoense. Chapecoense, based in the city of Chapeco, only entered Brazil's top division 2 years ago. But this year they managed to defeat Argentine biggies Independiente, Colombian club Junior, and in the semi-finals another Argentine club called San Lorenzo to make it to the biggest match in their club's history. The second match of the final was to be played at their stadium in fact, but the first would require them to travel a long way to Medellin in Colombia, and they did this via the Lamia Airlines flight 2933, which took off from Bolivia after a changeover. Aboard the plane were a total of 77 people, including 22 footballers plus staff and other passengers. It was an almost 3,000-kilometer flight, and towards its end, disaster struck. The flight seemed to suffer from an electrical failure or ran out of fuel or some such. The cause is yet to be ascertained. It circled around twice and then crashed into a desolate high-altitude area. Now, whatever be the circumstances, you rarely hear of people surviving a plane crash. However, in this instance, the plane somehow didn't explode, but it took 2 hours for rescue workers to get there. By then, it seemed to have been too late. There were some survivors, 6 in total, including 3 footballers. At least one person was found alive but died not long after. But 71 people did die in all, including most of the team. It's been a couple of days now, and the people there are still getting to grips with what's happened. At times like these, the sporting world comes together to offer its support. Such as, for instance, Atlético Nacional have asked CONMEBOL to award Chapecoense the Copa Sudamericana title with a very heartfelt message. A number of sporting occasions across the globe will observe a minute's silence. Brazilian clubs have offered to loan players to rebuild the club. It's all very heartening. But then you remember that these weren't just footballers, but also people with families and lives, and that makes it depressing once again. May those who have died in the crash rest in peace, and the ones who have managed to survive overcome their challenges. And let the world not forget Chapecoense, who dared to dream an impossible dream. And with that, we're at the end of this episode. We'll see you again very soon. I'm Ankit Prasad, and thank you for listening.